Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome in. We're going to wait just about 30 seconds for attendees to filter in, update Zoom, and all those fun things. So, yeah, just a couple of seconds and we'll get started. We appreciate everyone joining today. See more folks joining. Slowing down. Well, I'll go ahead and start and get us kicked off. I think there's still some more attendees coming in. But we will get going. I want to keep everybody from the exciting speaker and the topic we have today. So welcome. This is our August Synfluence monthly webinar. We're going to be talking about energy industry trends and opportunities with John Fremstad, our guest speaker from Duke Energy, who is also a supporter of Synfluence along with Orange County government. So there's a lot of be an exciting conversation. Please ask questions as we go. It's an exciting topic. It aligns with one of our Synfluence clusters. So the quick introduction to Synfluence for those of you who aren't members or may not be as familiar. Synfluence, we're a clustering initiative with the focus of supporting emerging technology clusters here in the region, elevating the innovation, economic development, and cross-cluster collaborations. You can see the 5 clusters that we focus on, semiconductors being our newest one, which is really exciting. So Duke Energy, John is talking today as part of our Energy Environmental Sciences cluster, and so we're excited to have him and explore some trends in that sector and some of the potential collaborations and opportunities. Just a couple of notes. If you want to keep up with Synfluence, you can use our awesome QR code there to go to our site, keep up with events, figure out how to connect, apply to become a member. This is a monthly webinar series, so our September 21st session will be on intellectual property for startups. So we rotate through topics that are relevant to the community and to the region. So that one will be a great session as well. Then just a couple of exciting events I want to point out that we're going to be involved with coming up. One is the Armed Forces Game Jam. So this is the combination of immersive technology, solving problems and solutions, creating solutions for the armed forces. So this will be in Orlando in the Central Florida Tech Grove. And we're also excited to support and participate in the Meta Center Global Week, which is, again, focusing on immersive technology and this combination of the Immersive Global Summit and Synapse Orlando in October. So that will be at the Dr. Phillips Center in Orlando. So lots of fun stuff happening with Synfluence, and we keep up with this with our fun code there. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to the Florida High Tech Corridor CEO, Paul Soul, who will give an introduction to our speaker for the day. Paul.
Hey, thanks, Jack. And thanks, everybody, for dialing in, or those that are watching recording every once in a while. They let me touch the controls and say a few words, and I wanted to do it especially today with John Fremstad. We've got a chance to meet a couple of years ago. John's been the head of innovation for Duke Energy for the last couple of years. He's been with Duke for over a decade, and he's been in the innovation world for at least a couple of decades. The one thing, John, I love about you is that it's always a fresh discussion. So I look forward to that here as well, from participation from the crowd and what you get to share with us today. So thanks for Duke Energy being a partner, and thanks for you today taking time out of your busy schedule. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to share my screen and let me know if it is there.
Yep, full screen.
Excellent. Well, first of all, let me say thanks for everybody for joining, and we couldn't be happier to be a partner and a supporter of the Florida High Tech Corridor, and certainly Synfluence. And I want to thank Jack for letting us be part of this, and of course Amy and Paul for always hosting us in this way. I'm going to talk about 3 things today, and it could take us 20 minutes or 40 minutes, depending on how interactive it may be. And then we'll wrap up and either give you a little bit of time back in your day, or we'll continue up until 1 o'clock, but we'll have you back to the world here, up till 2 o'clock Eastern. So 3 things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about global and national trends and how they're affecting energy, and then how that affects you in your personal life and in your business life. The second thing we'll talk about is Duke Energy specifically. And we'll talk about how Duke does more than just provide power. And what I mean by that is I'm part of an economic development group, and I'm specific to Florida. And we have some programs, some offerings, some people, and some partnerships like this partnership that help really the ecosystem of Florida companies grow from infancy, hopefully to a full mature stage 4 type of a company. And we have different ways to engage with us. And lots of times people don't go, well, why is Duke Energy doing this? Don't they provide power? Well, there are 2 reasons why, and I'll make a joke here. People usually know their power company for 2 reasons. The power's not on, or the bill's too high. And that's across the board in the globe. It is a necessity to play with all these things. You've got to have the original technology company, which is the utility, in order to play. The hospital doesn't work, your video games don't work, the Zoom call doesn't work. Nothing works without it. And of course, we couldn't live in climates like Florida without air conditioning and many of the other things that power brings us. But along with that, we need to support our communities. And so Duke is very, very, very involved at a local level. Here we serve 34 of the 67 counties in Florida. And we serve them by working with our economic development partners, our university and university research partners, private business, public-private entities, and of course, even the state of Florida on how we market Florida for business. So we are focused on growing business. And then as you will see, we tend to focus on those that which use more power. We are a publicly traded company, so we would like to sell power in a very responsible and successful way as we get sustainable, and we'll talk about this going forward. But so we have a 2-pronged approach. We want to help our communities and influence them and help them grow. And of course, we need to keep our business open as well and move the needle. So that being said, we'll do the 3 buckets: big picture, Duke, Florida, and then we'll do some questions. So the first thing I'm going to talk about really is why and what is happening in the world. And the very first thing that that we see, of course, if I can make my presentation work, and I might need Jack for this because I'm not being able to advance it very well.
Yep. I don't know if I can.
Can you advance the slide?
Let's see. I can do this. You'll see a notice for remote control, and I can advance them that way, probably.
Okay, let's see if you can move it. Yes. Okay, back up. Obvious question. An obvious thing in energy right now is war. And when I mean war, I'm going to go specifically to the Ukraine and Russia conflict. It's caused all kinds of what I would call challenges to a global energy supply, and how do we balance what is currently fossil fuel dominated power with the beginning and additive of the renewables. So fossil fuels provide what's called a baseline power. You have to be up 24/7. It always has to work. And most of our new renewables across the globe, whether that's wind, whether that's solar, whether that's hydrogen, are what's called intermittent. And so what that means is they only work when they're on. So the wind has to blow, the sun has to shine. We're not quite where we can store that energy yet. So it's a balancing act by all utilities, not just Duke. It's a balancing act between using traditional fossil fuels and new and exciting renewables. So that is kind of where it's definitely at. Jack, you can go to the next one, please. The other one that's really moving us is technology. Technology is demanding higher energy use. Think about it. This technology that we're on really didn't exist more than 3 or 4 years ago. Robotics are going crazy, whether that's in factories, manufacturing, all the way down to distribution centers, all that kind of stuff. So we need more power to make this go. Even though we're being more efficient, we also have a higher demand. Jack, you can go again. The other one that's big really is, and it's hard to talk about and everyone has a different thing, is politics. And politics isn't everything. And politics isn't necessarily what we say in America, left and right, or a particular candidate or not a particular candidate. Politics is also in the legislation that exists. It could be what is known globally as that the US is now again part of, like the Paris Climate Act. It could be a number of this current administration's offerings that we'll talk about coming up here on renewables or EV adaptation for cars, automobiles, trucks in both residential and commercial situations. So politics continues to play into how we look at it, all the way down to the old school. If you're old like me and you remember the power that OPEC used to have when it was really a fuel-driven economy with oil and petroleum, those prices are regulated and have the combination of what we just talked about: war, adoption of technologies, and of course the politics of each nation and each jurisdiction that governs the flow of it across the globe. Jack can go to the next one as well. The other thing is our new demand, which is appetite, if you would say, for delivery to our door. We love to press a button, especially in the United States, and stuff just appears. And so do I, and I'm sure so do you. From what that does, of course, is where is that manufactured? How quickly can it get to your door? Where is that stored? How is it packaged? How is that packaging manufactured? How does it all come together, and how does it travel? Whether that's an airplane, a boat, a truck, or down to a small vehicle that comes to your neighborhood. All of these things have an electrification process which changes what companies that provide energy have to do. The demand is skyrocketing. The demand for it to occur in a very safe and sustainable way is also skyrocketing, and we're growing as nations. So that's very important piece. We all play in this. So we say, hey, you should do this or you should do that. We know a big piece of this, of course, is our own behavior, and just to be aware of we're each one of us affecting how the grid works. Jack, this little thing happened. It continues to happen, and things, we are open. Of course, you can see now that is a photo from the end a year or so ago of how we talked about the pandemic. And really, that changed business across platforms. It really shaped how we might engage with everybody. And like I mentioned in the slide previously, how we work with getting product to our homes or to our businesses. So I know we've adjusted a bit, but some practices like the one we're on right now have not changed. We're much more likely, even as consumers and business participants, to do a webinar than we are to do a conference, or at least at a bit, a combo meal of the two. Jack, can go to the next one. So what is this doing? So what really this is doing, all of the stuff we just talked about, it's really changing the way we do foreign direct investment. We are decoupling, for good or bad, from a global market and taking more and more back into our own homes and our own places. So as you can see on this slide, our foreign direct investment decreased by quite a bit. In fact, 49%. Those are big numbers no matter how you measure it. But for us in the power business, and for you in whatever business you might be, whether it's economic development, entrepreneur, you're growing your own company, this gives us a great opportunity. And we'll take a look at that here on the next slide. The opportunity is this: North American onshoring skyrockets. So we're no longer going to rely 100% on something to be made elsewhere and get here. And there are two reasons for that. One, overlapping all this, as I said earlier, is the political landscape that changes, whether it's between the US and China or any of that, but it's also the cost of shipping these goods that are made elsewhere to the United States. So that takes airplanes and boats and trucks and all the things that push out in our current world a lot of carbon into the atmosphere and are forcing us to use those mechanisms in a safer place. You know that there are electric trucks that are being released now. There are certainly parts of that on ships. And of course, there's even lots of talk about jet planes, which will be electric in the future as well. What it does, as you can see by the numbers, is it really gives us a lot of opportunities. So even if the company used to be in Germany, and it still is in Germany, it's moved its manufacturing to the US. In the US, if you look at different reports, whether it's education or pharmaceuticals or energy or any of that, we want to have at least 18 to 20% of the raw material in the US, so that if we have a situation like what happened in the pandemic, a supply chain disaster wouldn't happen, and we can at least have the basics for the US economy to continue to move that are made here in the United States. So it gives us a great opportunity for all of us, but it also pushes the capacity that we have, and it really stresses the systems that are in place. Good news there for all of us in this space of growing Florida economy. You see how FDI projects are increasing, but you also see, look at the CapEx and the 75% increase in jobs. And of course, we're seeing that in every jobs report, certainly of 22 and up to 23, including this past Fridays for July's. We are still adding jobs, and everybody who would like to work is working. I mean, we have record lows since in the 1950s of people who are employed. And you see this, of course, certainly in our economy across the service industry here in Florida, where things, half a restaurant, it looks empty, but the reason it's not full is because they don't have the workers to do it. So with all this comes some challenges. Jack, if you would. What another good part for us is you can see the line. We all love hockey sticks in the business world. You can see the construction numbers just skyrocket. This is from 95 till now. You hit past 2022, and that is all of this projects. We're building housing as well as manufacturing, office, different things like that. And when I say office, of course, is not traditional builds like we would see in skyscrapers in New York City, for example, but offices more like in medical office buildings, in neighborhood banking opportunities. So things are coming towards the people, they're being built in a different way, and they're being built for folks to kind of go in and out of the workforce. If you look from work from home now, most of us are probably in a 3-day window, and a lot of that is about the averages skew. Many of us have to go to work. If you're in a manufacturing situation or a service industry, you have to go to the job. It's people like myself who would lean more towards a white collar world, what would be a traditional office space, that bring the number to 3 days a week. So that's our average right now. We're spending, about 60% of our time in an office. Jack, go ahead. Whoops.
Let me try something else. Trying to advance, maybe. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that.
So here's back into the politics and into the reality of what politics means. So when the old I'm just a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill actually happens and it becomes a law, there are things that happen. And here we have 3 examples of it with the infrastructure law, the Chips and Science Act, and of course the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, which also has a big piece of the EV market in that, and how you can get subsidies at a personal level and how it can help companies grow in that space. So for the first time since about the mid-70s, when you think about, if you remember, Kissinger went over to China in the first time in the early 70s, and he said, how are we going to start to do this stuff together? We've had a 50-year run of where the US government really backed off of what I would call R&D from a taxpayer-backed piece until now. These are the biggest bills publicly that we've seen in a long time. It's been carried by private industry in the United States. There are proponents and there are definitely detractors to both of these things, but the fact is these things are in. And if we go to the next slide, Jack, we'll start to talk about what else is happening. In my world, and in the world that affects you, because we all need power, these are lead times just on transformers. So transformers needed in a neighborhood, it's needed for a factory, it's needed for a data center. They're needed everywhere on the electrical grid across the globe. You can see the lead times to get one. So what does that do to your construction costs when you have a 430% elongation of your construction timeline? Well, prices and production costs increase, and they increase a lot, almost half. And back to why this stuff is coming and what it's all happening is at the time of 2020 and then into 2022, only 1 in 5 of these type of things are domestically done. So if there's 5 companies providing transformers, for example, in the whole world, only one of them then is here in the US. So we are seeing these shortages. It causes both an overload sometimes of the grid, and you'll hear about power not working well in Texas in an ice storm, or some of the heat we've had this summer where in parts of the region, thankfully not Duke. I'll talk about why we think we are not having those issues, but that happens for certain. So Jack can go to the next one as well. The other piece of this is, however you want to look at what's happening with our climate and who may have caused it. And I'll throw out some of my own theories, and I will put an asterisk behind them that says these are John's theories, not Duke Energy's or anyone else's. But we've had an incredible number of billion-dollar weather events. When that happens, it causes production to slow. It causes, in some cases, power to go out. And some of this is just from one factor that we never talk about, and you'll see it in some of these other slides, is that we just have a heck of a lot of people on the globe. And it is, we never just talk about those numbers. So there's my theory. A lot of what's happening is because we no longer have 2 billion people on the planet. When I was born, there were 3.5 in the 60s, and now we're over 8, and we're going to push to 10. If you live in your house and you have 2 bedrooms in 1950, and now you have the same 2-bedroom apartment, but you have 8 people living in it, well, you're going to bump into each other. Stuff's going to happen. We just have issues that are happening on this small apartment called the planet because we have a whole lot of people living in the apartment. What you do see is Florida, and I'm going to talk specifically to Florida because we're known traditionally, and probably more so by reputation than by reality, that hurricanes come. And of course, in the last year, we had the worst one other than Andrew in the history of Florida. If you look nationally and you look at the 50 states, and I'll throw in even the District of DC and Puerto Rico and Guam, a few territories as well. We rank 26th, and I want you all to think about this. We're 26th in disaster recovery from an insurance standpoint. So we're actually middle of the road when the media might have you believe that Florida is a very risky place to put your business. In fact, is right probably where you think it would be. For a very giant populated peninsula between 2 giant bodies of water, an ocean and a gulf, we're quite safe. And part of that is the grid, the resiliencies, some of the way we build things here, all the way down to building codes and roofing and windows and different things like that. And I'll give you a real quick example. In 2017, Irma came through. And just from a Duke standpoint, in some parts of our region, it took a number of days, maybe over a week, for power to return. That was a small storm in comparison to Ian, which happened last year. The amount of money Duke spent in what's called hardening the grid, making it more resilient, that could be underground wires and new developments, that could be the way the transmission lines work from the generation of power all the way to where it gets distributed. It could be just the way we are able to use AI to direct traffic, in essence, of where power goes. Are we going to use this power plant over here? Can we move it over to this power plant over here, et cetera, et cetera? We were able to be up in just a matter of hours. So when you talk about going from days to hours, it's kind of what the general public doesn't see. It's kind of the retraction on page 14 of the newspaper back in the day, where once upon a time you were the headline for something going wrong. People don't usually talk about what's going right. And so these storms give us an opportunity to build back better, to use some of the legislation terms, but to also be more resilient and be more intentional with how we go forward so that we can live in climates like Florida and adapt to our change, not just run from our change. Jack, you can go to the next one. This goes back to my people. 8.5 billion people. This goes back to 1950. Part of the reason these things increase is, and especially you can see it on the residential, there's just a heck of a lot more houses. They all need power. Nobody's living in Maine without heat, and no one's living in Miami without air conditioning. We all need that. You'll see, actually, once you got up to a certain level of commercial production in the US, our industrial rates haven't increased that much. It's come from the commercial, and in the commercial, sometimes the way power and utility definition works, that commercial band would include technologies. So it often includes data centers or an Apple, a Google, a Facebook. Those things would not be industrial because they're not building or smokestacking manufacturing, but they are using a lot of power in order to make sure our data, our banking, our TikTok, whatever, our Instagram, Threads, X / once upon a time Twitter, whatever it is we use, that takes a lot of bandwidth, and that's where you see the growth in the commercial piece. Direct use, for those of you who wonder, because I did right away, I'm like, what the heck is that? Direct use is when the customer and or the manufacturer or business is directly using power from a source. So there are all kinds of regulatory and policy issues in each state that are different on how you can use direct use types of situations. California is the biggest implementer of this. So if anyone has an offline question about direct use, we can go into the weeds on that in a little bit of time. Okay, Jack. This is a fun slide because our demands are going up. There are very few really try and true renewable options, and they're all on here right now. And so I will call renewables right now wind and solar. And the other one for carbon's sake is nuclear. Nuclear is a clean technology and it's probably going to have to be part of our strategy going forward. But you can see it's flat. There's no growth there. It is what it is. It hasn't been necessarily fallen off too much, but it is staying there. But we think there's a way, hopefully even through fusion, which has been talked about a lot in the marketplace in a theoretical situation and in a lab situation, not in an application of the lab results, but it's starting to look like it can happen. But you can see coal is falling way off. That's the one thing everyone agrees on in the United States, is that we will be backing off of coal, and renewables have now gone past coal usage. And as I started it off with, we have to have that baseline power that keeps everything on 24/7. And that in our world in Florida is natural gas. We're on a peninsula. There's a pipeline that feeds us. There are multiple pipelines that feed us either through the Gulf or it's trucked, moved, different things around with natural gas. You will see that as our number one source, probably in the high 80s to low 90 percentile, depending on the day. In Florida is natural gas power. Jack, you can go to the next one. So we'll talk about the CHIPS Act, and it's great because we have a big piece of it right here in Central Florida with Bridge and some of our friends in Osceola County that are working on this, and they're close to getting an NSF grant, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that happens as they continue forward. You can go to the next slide, Jack. Since the CHIPS Act and the supply chain investments, this is what's been announced. These are not small projects. Each one of these is like a city of power, just to put it in layperson's terms. It takes a lot of power to make that go. Now that's good for a Duke Energy's bottom line. It is also a challenge to deliver that power in a sustainable way, an affordable way, in a reliable way. Those are the three things we always talk about: affordability, sustainability, and reliability. It's really easy to give you two of those things. So for example, if you want cheap power that's always reliable, the best source is coal. But that's probably not going to fit our political environment. It's not going to fit our legislative environment, and it's not going to fit any of us who want the planet to change its carbon emissions as we go forward. So there are challenges here as well as great opportunity. So you can just see the mass of these things happening. If you go to the next one, Jack, you'll get a little picture here of what one would look like. This is in Ohio. This is Intel. This thing is, like I said, like a city of power, but yet that's all of the space that it takes. Although that's a large land mass, and that's a rendering that isn't completely built yet. But excuse me, it's huge, and it really takes a ton of power and energy to make this happen. These are the decisions that are happening every day in this country that affect all of us as far as how our power grids work and how we move forward with renewable energy. You can go to the next picture. The thing that we're talking on right now, and I notice it's recorded for nobody's future viewing, I'm sure, but if so, it could be, that's all stored somewhere. You know, make sure you tell your kids, I came out of the data center business, just because they delete it from their phone, it's never deleted. It's somewhere. It sits in a server farm. For example, Duke Energy houses some of Apple's biggest products. If you use Siri or Apple's music library, it's all in a data center in North Carolina. So you're actually using a Duke. Duke has to keep that rolling and going all the time. And it takes tremendous amounts of power. You can go to the next one, Jack. Of course, our solar arrays and solar farms are of all different forms and fashions in the last 10 years. The panels on these things are getting so much better and so much more efficient. And we're getting better at how we use the land. So generally, to just kind of give you an idea what Duke doesn't buy land to put their solar arrays. They try to work with a landowner and in some occasions a farmer, where we land lease. The solar goes on top, and there are all kinds of ways that you can farm and feed and do all kinds of things in and around the solar array. So you could have sheep grazing on this land. You could grow berries and certain things underneath. So there are all different ways there. And then of course, as I started, the panels are becoming much more efficient and having a much longer lifespan. So hopefully today's panels could last 10 years and compared to a 3 to 5 years. So just kind of think of solar panels like you would think of technology in your computing power. We're at about a 3 to 5 year refresh rate in the technology upgrade space. And they're probably in that phase right now too, but we're trying to extend the lifespans of these to 10 to 20 years. You can go to the next one, Jack. So it leads us to all kinds of exciting things as we go forward. And here's kind of a quick picture of the big three. In America for renewable energies, which are intermittent, meaning it only works when it works, is solar and wind. We can do wind in the plains of Texas or out in the Midwest in Iowa, Indiana. You don't see a lot of it in Florida, although someday you may see it offshore. And if for those of you with the fancy beach houses, it'll be offshore far enough, it won't wreck your view. But what we have to figure out is the big box on the right-hand side of the picture, and that's the storage. The magic bullet is the ability to store this energy long-term. We have to be able to take what happens at noon in the sunshine and equate that to your shower and your dishwasher and your oven at 9, 10 o'clock in the evening when you're using it. So we're working on that. When we get battery storage at that level, it will be a great blessing. We've made huge leaps and bounds, but that's a challenge. Jack, can you go to the next one? All these things lead to this electric vehicle piece. And boy, you're seeing them everywhere now, from semis to, of course, cars are far more common. It's not just the rich guy down the road who bought a Tesla S Plaid model for 120 grand. You've got a really, really nice array of what I would call under $45,000 options on cars. And when the new price average of a car is $48,000, that's competitive in the spot. But what people forget to say is electric cars only as environmentally friendly as its source. So if you buy a Tesla, let's just stay on that model, in France, it's a nuclear car. The generation for your electricity is nuclear. If you buy this car in Indiana, it's a coal car. If you buy it in Florida, it's a natural gas car. So remember, there's a whole bunch of processes that's happening here, and we have to learn how we can not just add to the grid, but begin to change our sources of how the energy is generated to make them purely green 100%. Jack can go to the next one. Now, it's still better than burning fossil fuel, petroleum or gasoline, or even LNG, liquefied natural gas. But so you can see all of this is from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are battery plants, which are needed for the electric vehicles, and then the electric vehicle plants themselves. All this needs energy. So whether that's a Tesla plant, you have a brand new VinFast. VinFast is the new Vietnamese company. If you saw the market cap on them yesterday, they were just they just went public, and their market cap is bigger than GM or Ford. We'll see if the stock is true or not, but they have a new announcement for assembly in North Carolina. We've got Volvo in South Carolina, BMW. It just goes on and on and on. You can see it's concentrated mostly in the Southeast, a little bit leaning towards Florida. We just don't have the luxury of large tracts of land at a reasonable cost. It costs much more to buy 5,000 acres in Florida than it does in South Carolina. Those are just financial facts of the business. You can go to the next one. This is where it looks to go forward. You can kind of see where the capacity is. It follows what I would call the auto belt itself. So there's Michigan, where the big three used to be located. You've got all the Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, where Honda and Toyota and many other places down into Tennessee, Alabama, Mercedes, Hyundai, Kia. So the new EVs are going to be close to what's called the OEMs, the parts manufacturers that already exist as the engine assembly changes from what's called ICE, an internal combustion engine, to an electric piece. You can go to the next one. That kind of brings us to where we are, and I'm going to segue into all of these things happening and go very quickly into it's 2023, and here's your Duke Energy update. So if you would, for those of you who don't know us and only know us here in Florida, we're a very large company, one of the largest utilities in the country. On any given day, we're the largest or the smallest. It's kind of like the hotel business, depending on who we might acquire, how customers' growth is happening in certain areas. But you can see we have about 8.2 million customers in 6 states. We have a natural gas business, which brings in the 7th state total. So we're in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee with gas in the Nashville area, very small, but there. And then of course, Florida. We have about 28,000 employees, 27,000 employees. We have another 27 to 30,000 contractors who put on a Duke badge every day in the marketplace. As we talk about all the things we just kind of prefaced this whole deal with, in the next 10 years, we're doing $145 billion in capital improvements into the grid. And you can see underneath there, 85%, 123 of that billion is going to harden our grid and to make it more resilient and more efficient and more sustainable. And with that will become the affordability piece. To put that in perspective, just for Florida, take out the one, and it's about $45 billion. So Duke is taking a responsibility to make us more resilient and make us more efficient and make us more customer friendly, all those things as we go forward. Jack, can you go to the next one? Here's what we've been talking about. So if you take a look at, this is our race to net zero. This is our piece by 2030. We are going to have a 50% reduction in CO2. By 2050, we're going to be carbon neutral. And you can see just from 2005 to 2022 on the left-hand side there in the blue, 750 megawatts. That's a lot of power has been retired that was coal. So we're constantly beginning to close those down. So when you think about how politics plays into stuff, a decision was made long ago in the Bush administration, business-wise, that companies like Duke were going to begin to see it was financially feasible to rid coal from our generation. And then in the meantime, we've added 6,000 megawatts of the regulated renewables. You can go to the next one, Jack. This kind of breaks it down in a pie chart. I'll give you the gray. As Paul said, I've been here a little over a decade. So when you look at just what's happened from 2005 to now, which if you look at anything on a big piece and you were able to cut your coal use by that type, it's amazing. And you'll see where it is by 2030, we'll be down to 9%. So think about that, from 60% coal and oil fuel to 9%. So this is happening. It's happening like so fast. It's in real time. We're all running full board. Go to the next one. And so everyone thinks of us as a power company, which we are. But like I said earlier, and you can let these roll in, Jack, there's like 3 or 4 of them. And this is what our team does. And I want to explain our team. We're an economic development team in Florida specific, and there's 11 of us. And we are geographically located across our footprint, which is the 34 counties. And to make it, a map will come up later, but if you just drew a line across, you just stop and leave it right there, Jack, and I'll talk about these. But if you drew a line across from St. Pete to Daytona and you went north, that's Duke Energy territory. Below that, Florida Power and Light. We are like a congressional district. So there are, sometimes doesn't make sense. So we call it Swiss cheese. Sometimes we may not serve all of Orange counties because there's like Orlando Utilities Commission is here that serves the city of Orlando. So there are different things, and we are in a regulated environment. So you get to pick your utility one time as a business person, and that's where you choose to locate your office, your plant, your R&D, or your manufacturing. Once you choose your location, that's your power provider. So our team helps businesses find the right spot. So we provide that service. We are the voice of energy, as it says at the negotiation table. We promote our benefits to the CEO or the real estate broker or whoever might be deciding it. We support and work with our economic development organizations. There are many of them in our 34 counties, whether they be city, whether they be county, whether they be regional. They all help us really help our customers find the right homes. And without our economic development partners, we wouldn't be able to do our job. So we're there to support them. And when I say product here, product means a site. Product means dirt. Sometimes it gets confusing because you're like, well, isn't the energy's product energy? And no, when we talk about product and economic development, we want to find the right site that can handle what you need and is ready to go right now. So we have a whole real estate piece. You can go to the next one. So within our program are these departments. So if anyone here on the call, whether you be an economic development organization or a young business that's looking to grow, if you would need help with a labor study, or you would need help wondering about how finance might work, or are there venture companies to help me grow, we can help you with your research. We support programs like Florida High Tech Corridor and Senfluence, like the Tampa Bay Innovation Center, like Synapse and GrowFL, different accelerators. We work with UF Innovate, all things to help our young companies grow. And then of course, stay here. We want you to grow, mature, and live in Florida, not move your program elsewhere in it. We have strategic development, which tries to make sure we're all on the same page, from the state of Florida and the governor's office to the Department of Commerce down. How do we connect the dots so that we're on a single message? That's a difficult thing to do. There are lots of opinions in 34 counties, let alone 67 counties in the state of Florida. So that's always ongoing. We have marketing and events. We try to market all this, put this stuff together. We do Electricity 101 once a year. We just did it at the University of Florida a couple of weeks ago. We'll do it again next year. So if you weren't able to attend, we'll do it again. And that's what I call kind of electricity for non-engineers. So it kind of gives you an idea how it all works. We have a whole department that just works with our companies and helps them find their place. And that's our industry recruitment. And then we have a whole grants, programs, and the compliance of those that go with it. And then last, which I think is our most important department, is our site development. You'll hear me talk about here and everywhere I go, I always say no site, no deal. So let's say your company's growing or a company's looking to come into Florida and they have the right labor force and they have the right schools and they have the right everything, education, but if they don't have a site that works and a site that's ready today, meaning not 5 years from now, but today, it doesn't matter. So no site, no deal. So we think sites are the biggest thing the utility can help with as we help our companies and our organizations try to grow business here in Florida. Jack, the next one would be great. This is just for fun. I can only count to 5, and it's really confusing since it's really only to 4, but we'll call them 0 in there because you got to make it a 0 when it's 0% income tax. It's about a 6% raise over the rest of the world. There's a reason, if you're a baseball fan, that the pitchers from the New York Mets and other places are back in Texas. because when you're making $250 million a year, 6% is a big chunk of change, and you'd rather keep that than give it away. We're the #1 fastest growing state. We know that. We have the greatest university system in the US, and you can read the rest of these for yourself. But if you're in business, this is a good spot to do business. We have challenges as a state, for sure. Yes, everywhere does, but it's very business friendly. Jack, you go to the next one. This is where we are. So the colors on there are Duke Energy territory. As I said, it's a little bit of a kind of gerrymandered look of how a congressional district might be. But the big regions that are growing, Ocala, you can notice that most things that are growing are along the interstate systems or along a fiber system. And remember, fiber, rail, interstate, they all kind of follow the same lines because that's where there's easement. That's also where there's power. So Ocala and the distribution and logistics, they can serve a state of 25 million people and growing from that region. Zephyr Hills in the Pasco region, Winter Haven, over in Polk area. We just got a ton of them that are there. On this slide here, you'll see the site and project development cycle. And this is kind of how we lay our sites, across, and I'm not going to go into depth with this. We can talk about this offline. If you're looking to build a new site or grow your current site, you need to engage with us. We can help you identify that site. We can help you assess that site. We can help you with the geotech pieces. We can help you with the construction pieces. We can help you with the relationships with what I call architects, engineers, and constructors, the AEC world. We can help you improve what you're looking at and help that landowner move along. And we can also promote your business through many channels. We have newsletters, websites, other things, and many partners in our economic development partnership that would be more than happy to help you grow. Because what it does for the communities, of course, is increase their tax base and increase that. So if we go to the next one, Jack, that'd be great. This kind of gets close to the end here. This is the big piece. We do rates. Rates are very important. The more power you use, of course, the more important how much it costs becomes in there. So we can calculate that for you. There are different ways we do it. A site is really important. And then, of course, as I said, once you pick your site, you're with us for a long time. So we want to help you design your construction process and streamlining, and our engineering team would love to be with your engineering team to help grow your business. If you go to the last one, I believe, you can just knock all these things in. If you are looking to grow, or you have a friend or a family member, or are involved in someone who's growing, we have these programs. We can reduce your power bill for 30%. Well, if you got $1 million a month power bill, that's a lot of money. We can help you with your sites. Like we said, advancing your site, we'll give grants, and these are grants up to $200,000 to help improve and speed up the process. We will do that on the project as well, what's called the Florida Investment Fund. So if you have a project in motion and we need a little extra help for a workforce training program or something like that, we can help you there. And coming soon in this new interest rate model of capital that is now really increased in cost, we're going to get to a really specific situation here. And I'm going to tell you all to come back to me on this, but we're going to offer some 0% loans of up to $1 million to help you build your facility and kickstart it. Now, it's a loan, it's not a grant, but 0% over 5 to 7% on multiple, it doesn't take long to save some money. So I hope I was able to kind of wrap all this up in the 45 minutes here to talk about. And then the last final piece I'll say is every second quarter of the year, so this will be in February of next year, we release our grant program, and that can go to our organizations, or in some cases, some company, we did it for 35 economic development organizations and some private this year, but it's $25,000 maximum. And that has to be on a project. It could be a website, could be a video, could be an internship program or workforce development program that helps economic development. So how are you helping your community, your region, your location grow. We do that as well. So I want to leave you with that. Come back to us in the beginning of next year, and those grant applications will go out. For example, the Florida High Tech Corridor is a winner of a $25,000 grant this year. And so we are very happy about that. And yeah, thank you, Paul. And we just hope that, or I just hope that I was able to give you a little information to show, it's a complicated picture, and it's really fun to be involved in things that are called like energy and water. The whole world is moving on these two issues, and we have a responsibility. And I always close with this. We want to leave the campsite better than we found it. It's our responsibility to do so. And as you engage with us as a customer, it's your responsibility to help us. So let's get there together. And thank you so much for the time today, Jack and Amy and Paul. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much, John. There's a ton of great information there. We have a couple of questions, and we have a few minutes left. So
all right. I'll probably have a couple of maybe answers.
I'll fire these over. So the first one is a two-parter. So how do you think these two key components can be overcome in the USA, but more specifically in Florida? Number one is lack of site readiness, and number two, lack of employees, particularly in the lower income categories.
Well, I hope I helped you with the first one right out of the gate, which is we have a site readiness program. Others do too. We'd love to engage with that. So identifying sites, as I said, no site, no deal. We're getting there. We're also working with our state partners, which is now through the Department of Commerce. Enterprise Florida is, as of July 1, is now the Florida Commerce piece, Select Florida. So we're starting to engage with them. And then we're also working with our other utility partners to put together site databases to help with this. We'll also get you with a broker. We'll get you with a land developer. We'll gladly connect the dots. So we are in our infancy. As I talked about the Carolinas, they started all this probably in 2005, and we're doing it in maybe the last 5 to 7 years. But we have just Duke Energy now, we have 50 site readiness sites, 50 in our 34 counties. If you're interested in one of those, I'd love to see you on one, and we'll find the right one for you. On the talent piece, it's always difficult. One of the good things is we don't have the problem that many of our Northeast and Midwestern brethren have, and that's we have a growth issue in Florida, not an exodus issue. So more and more people are coming, and we're working more not just on the high-end stuff that we like to talk about, where we talk about the big tech jobs and in our universities, but also at our state colleges and our apprenticeship programs and different things like that to work with what would be more of a tech piece, or what would be called vocational education as well. So there are opportunities there, but there are real challenges. But we're booming. So every metric, we're actually winning that war. It's just it's constantly going.
All right. Well, thank you for that. The next one's about electric vehicles. There was a question about how is the projected growth of electric vehicles and their demands on the grid impacting innovation in the power sector, particularly in Florida?
Well, what it does is two things. It forces companies like us, who are big, giant monsters that have a grid to protect and energy to change and innovate quickly for a changing consumer need. So it's pushing us to be better and to be more green. What it's also doing is a huge demand. Just cars on the road or trucks on the road that are going to be electric could change. Just let's use Amazon delivery, for example, could really put 5 to 7 megawatts, which is a huge load for a distribution center, onto our grid. So what that does is as you look up and down I-75, if you're driving, or I-10, you're going to see more and more solar fields. You're going to see more and more energy opportunities coming online. We have some that we can't yet talk about in the hydrogen space that will be in our territory, which is fully green hydrogen. And what that means is that we're not using carbon producing beans to run the electrolyzer to separate the water to make the hydrogen. So you'll hear about that. But so EVs is giving us a great opportunity, and it's also going to be slower than we want it to be, because I know everyone on here is like, well, that's great, but if I'm driving to Miami, I don't have 45 minutes to stop and charge my deal, and I don't know where to go. So the charging infrastructure, like in everything, policy and infrastructure either it lags. There's an old statement, you either build a road 30 years too early or 30 years too late. It's never on time. So we're now trying to match the demands of it. I think it's interesting. It's all the conversation in the media. It's all the conversation. You'd think everyone has an electric car. Adoption is still in the single-digit percentage. There's still more than 90% of the cars on the road aren't electric. So is it making progress? Yeah. So I think it's a great opportunity for us. I don't see us having issues with it. I see us hopefully having more fast chargers so you can stop for 10 minutes instead of 45. We probably won't be in that business. That'll probably be like a gas station. We'll provide electricity to it, but it's probably not going to be the Duke charger system. Although we do have, because we're the electric company, about 600 chargers across Florida now. So we have put them out there to work, but it's probably, we're going to stay in our lane and do our business, which is provide the electricity.
Awesome. Excellent. I think this is probably our last question for time's sake, but so last question, what is your take on the outlook for overbuilding renewables plus in grid improvements versus energy storage?
Wow, that's a good one. I think the excitement and the flavor for renewables is a fine line. And I'll use this example. Solar fields, you see them, they take a lot of land. We have to be careful not to give up industrial or manufacturing type land just for solar and housing, because then where are those people going to go to work? So we're fighting ourselves in some situations to not take the best land for solar farms. So I think it's going to be a push and pull dialogue all the way through it. What was the second part of that?
Yeah, so overbuilding renewables and then grid improvements versus energy storage.
I like energy storage, and I think we're really close, and you're seeing it more and more. It isn't, I get to see some things that aren't yet commercial. So I'm bullish on the energy storage piece. So I think whoever's asking the question is probably knows the answer. We're probably going to overbuild renewables, and we're probably going to be slow on some of the storage piece in the next decade, and then it'll probably flip. And that's the way we're going to get to 2050. One's going to outpace the other, and we'll have to pull back. But the storage piece is exciting. Wouldn't it be great if the sun could shine in Florida like it does, and at night we could capture it and really give it back at the cost of a battery instead of at the cost of both the environment and the cost of natural gas prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I think we're kind of right time. John, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Lots of great information.
Thank you, Jack. Again, we want to say thanks to all people that joined us, but especially to the Corridor and Senfluence for doing this. This organization that serves 23 counties, and through Senfluence, this is a way to get engaged with your community. And it's really important, I think, for us to, as I said earlier, leave the campsite better than we found it. And we can do that together. Everywhere I go, people are optimistic in a pessimistic media world. And so I think when you just get out there and you meet some people and you shake some, people are trying to make it a better place. And so let's get on board and do it and be successful, thrive while we're doing it. They're not independent thoughts. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Great working with you. And for everyone listening in, appreciate you joining. Our next webinar is September 21st, talking IP for startups. So connect with us, let us know any questions or follow-up thoughts. But with that said, everyone have a great afternoon.